This is my encounter with a man named John who I met on social media. This just happened to me in the last month, so I'm still emotionally hurt, but I want to share what happened. I met John on FB. He was actually on a friend of mine's friends list and replied to my comment on a picture she posted, so I assumed that my friend knew him. He messaged me telling me that he thought my comment was fun and smart and he really liked my profile picture. My friend had thousands of friends. She friends everyone and anyone. Myself, I have around 200 friends, and I've now learned a heavy lesson in friending strangers. I accepted John's friend request, and we started chatting almost immediately. He told me he was 49 years old and in the military, that he was getting ready to go over to the Ukraine for a military leadership mission, which is something I'd never heard of, but I know nothing about the military. He said he was a single father raising his 11-year-old daughter, that his wife had died due to a kidney disease and she died 2 years ago, and he's been trying to raise his daughter, but he doesn't always know what to do, as his now deceased wife usually did all the motherly things with his daughter. He asked me about my life and if my husband and I are doing well. I corrected him that I'm single. I had been married years ago, but the divorce was very bitter, and I've been single since. My husband cheated on me, then took me to the cleaners as a result of the divorce. He had the money to hire a hotshot attorney. I didn't. So I ended up losing everything, including the house we had bought together. A long story short, I've spent years rebuilding my life, and I was at a place while I'm not wealthy, I'm financially stable. John said he lived in Texas, but being in the military, he traveled all over the globe, but he did say his house was in Texas. I asked him how his daughter copes with him being in the military and having to travel all the time, and he said she misses her mother but stays with his mother, her grandmother, when he's deployed, and she lives in Virginia. John was very charming in a sense, as he always asked how I was feeling, if I'd eaten, how I was doing, how my work was, if I slept well. When we first started chatting, he asked me where I lived, if I worked full time, and if I owned or rented my home. I explained my situation and how I pulled myself up by my bootstraps after my divorce and worked hard to rebuild and build back my life. John said he admired me for being such a strong and resourceful woman. He told me after his wife died, he was very lost and went into depression by taking dangerous missions in the military. He then realized he has to live for his daughter and started taking what he called calculated risks. He asked me to download the app Zangy so we could talk without any problems. He told me the app had a military grade security so he wouldn't worry too much about anything. I downloaded the app and we started chatting there. At the time, I'd never heard of this app. His life story, up until I met him online, was that his mother and father were from Germany, and he grew up in Germany, and then moved to the States when he was 15 because his father and mother divorced, and his mother moved to the USA because she was a chemical engineer, and he told me his father was a drunk and they had gotten a divorce because of it. He then had a hard time learning English, but made it through school and at 18 joined the army to, quote, thank the United States for allowing him to be a citizen. He met his wife while he was deployed to Afghanistan. She too was in the military as a chef, and they married, and she had their daughter. She then became sick and died. He thinks she died due to being exposed to chemicals in the war. His daughter was named Natalie, and his story was so detailed I really never second guessed it. He voice chatted with me a few times in the beginning just to say hello because he said he wanted to put my mind at ease that he was real. He spoke a few words to me even in German, and he had a slight accent. He would text me all the time, and I did let him know that when I was at work, our phones are not allowed to be on and used, only during lunch and breaks, and I made him very aware of this. It never failed, though, he would message me to say hello and tell me he was thinking of me. We would voice chat in the evenings when he wasn't busy as well. He had often told me he was looking for a serious relationship that would lead to marriage and that he didn't want to play around. He wanted to find real love again. I told him, I'm open to finding love, but I'm cautious because of my ex husband. And he asked me several times if I've dated anyone online and what my experience was. I told him I hadn't dated anyone. John would get upset, though, if I wasn't home at night, and this was a concern to me. I told him several times about my friend Stephanie and my other work friend Nick. We were all work besties, and we would go out for dinners, concerts, movies, and sometimes we'd just hang out or go out of town to some kind of event. John would get upset with me if I didn't message. He often questioned me about my friend Nick. And I told him Nick's just a friend. That's all he's ever been. I've worked with him for years. John told me he's a jealous man and he doesn't want me playing around with other men and that he's fully in love with me and wants us to be together. I told John several times, again and again, that I would love for us to meet and see where it leads. He told me he'd be gone to the Ukraine on a mission for 6 months, then return to the States, and we could meet then. He asked me if I would be his and be faithful to him while he was gone, and when he returned, he would want to marry me. I told him that's going pretty fast, but if he would be faithful to me, I'll be faithful to him, and when we meet, we'll see how things go. I didn't really date anyways. We took our vow to be faithful and exclusive, and he changed his FB profile status to in a relationship and he tagged me. Well, I had mentioned to Stephanie and Nick that I had met someone online, but didn't give a whole lot of details. With the status change on our profiles, this sent my besties running to hear about my new man. I told John that my friends were happy for us and excited. This is when John got upset. He told me not to tell my friends about us until we met, as he wants to surprise them with an engagement party and he doesn't want them to interfere with our relationship. He asked me why I told them that we were together, and I told John you changed your status on Facebook and tagged me in a relationship. So I changed my status too. John quickly changed his status to where I couldn't see it and told me to do the same. He was afraid that maybe people would try to break us up because he's in the military and would be away and they would try to fill my mind with doubt. And he was getting ready for his deployment. I was at a point where I didn't want to argue with him and I just told him when he returns we could meet and update our status then. It wasn't a big deal to me. After all, we'd not met in person. This was just an online relationship for now. John left for the Ukraine. He told me his service would be spotty, but he would always be available on the app as it's a military grade app. He left, and it was an entire day later when he messaged me to tell me he had arrived at the military base. We continued to chat, but it was at different times. It ended up being later at night, which really affected my work performance. John would call me around 3 a.m. my time. He said it was the only time we could talk due to his military duties. And I told him after day 4 of this that I needed sleep. I turned my phone off and went to sleep and slept through the night. I woke up in the morning, turned my phone on, and had several missed calls and tons of messages from John asking if I've abandoned him and that he needed me. There was an incident at the military base. A crazed man came onto the base and he was forced into hiding. I told John I fell asleep and turned my phone off. I was exhausted and he's safe. He's in the military on a base with tons of other military men around him. John said we always have to stay in contact. He loves me so much he was heartbroken, and he thought it was my friend Nick that I had left him for. And I told John he was being absolutely absurd, and I had to go to work. I told him we need to talk later, and I left for work. John texted me several times during the day, but I didn't get the messages until I finished work. We talked that night on voice chat, and John said he just needed me so much, and he started crying on the phone that he's risking his life here and he panicked when I didn't answer. I told him I'm exhausted after work and I need sleep. We can talk on the weekends at night, but not during my work week. I set my boundaries and he seemed to accept them. One Friday night we voice chatted and halfway through the chat he hung up. He messaged me saying his phone was out of military chat minutes. He explained the chat app is free, but he needs minutes to continue voice chatting. He said he forgot to load his account before he left for the Ukraine and asked me if I could get him a $100 Apple card and it would load his card and load his phone. I stupidly bought him the card and texted it to him. He told me his daughter missed him so much, so he was using his talk minutes to call her too. He said she was sick with a terrible cold and he'd been worried about her. I told him I hoped she felt better, 'cause colds are no fun. John kept professing his love for me and would send me pictures of where he was at in the Ukraine, and he said it was so bad there. He said once he returned home, he wanted to retire, settle down, marry me, and maybe we could start a little business together. I told him that'd be wonderful. Let's see how things go. By now, we were talking all the time, and he did respect my limits on weeknights. John sent me a couple of naughty pictures of himself, and he asked me for some too. I obliged because I thought we were like a couple, we just hadn't met in person, and over the weeks I sent John a lot of compromising photos. Then John asked me again for an Apple card, and this time $200. I told him, well, I love talking to him. I really can't afford to buy a $200 gift card. He told me he tried to access his account, but being where he is, he's unable to access his money. But he sent me a screenshot of his bank balance and account, which at the time had over $300,000 in it. He told me as soon as he's home, he'll pay me back double. I ended up again buying him another Apple gift card worth $200. I started giving them to him. He told me his daughter was still fighting some kind of lung infection and she might have to go to the hospital. I told him I'd pray for her, and he told me he tried to come home, but his commander would not allow it. By this time, he had 4 months left on his so called deployment. I told him that his mother was taking care of his daughter and not to worry, she'll be okay. John again asked me for a $100 Apple card, as he said he was trying to call his daughter to check on her, but he couldn't get through due to his minutes being low since he talked to me so often. At this point, I was buying $100 Apple cards almost weekly. I partly felt bad because we talked so much and that used his minutes. I told him maybe we should talk less so he can check on his daughter more. And this made John mad. He accused me of cheating again on him with Nick. This started an argument, and I'd finally had enough. I told him that he needs to stop accusing me of cheating. I don't cheat, and I will have my male friend Nick, as we've been friends for many years. I simply suggested he use some of his minutes on his daughter and not talk to me for hours on end. She's more important. I ended our conversation and refused his calls, and I didn't open my text for a few days. I had to really think about the relationship. If this is the kind of jealousy he has now, he would be just as bad in person. And I finally sent a message to John telling him my feelings. During my time away from chatting to him, he'd filled my messages with paragraph after paragraph begging for me to talk to him and if I had forsaken him. I wrote him my feelings and didn't get a reply. I figured he was angry with me and I spoke my mind. The next night I was fast asleep when I received a phone call from a number I didn't know. It was a man calling himself Commander Jefferson from the United States Army. He told me John was injured in a terrible accident involving an overturned military vehicle and he had to be flown to an American hospital in Germany. This commander said John had me on his emergency contacts, so they called me. I was upset and I asked if he's okay, and they said he had two broken legs and a serious back injury and he had to be rushed to the nearest hospital, which was in Frankfurt, Germany. This commander then gave me a German phone number to which he said was the hospital. He told me to add the number on WhatsApp and I could communicate with the military doctor. To just give them John's enlistment number, which the commander gave me, and it will release the medical clearance to speak to me. Make sure you tell them you're his wife, is what the commander told me to do. I added the number on WhatsApp, which the profile picture was a red cross on a white background, and the name came up as a medical army center. I sent this number a message giving them John's enlistment number, and I told them I was his wife. I know looking back, this is ridiculous. I soon received a text back from the number stating that John was in critical condition and needed emergency leg surgery to set pins in his two shattered legs, or he'd never walk again, and they were rushing him into surgery as we speak. They told me to stand by and sent me a picture a few hours later of a pair of legs in casts. Nothing else. I asked for a picture of John, but they didn't give me anything. They said he had the surgery and he will be in the hospital for weeks, if not months, then transported back to America. I asked if they called his mother and his daughter if they know, but the person responded telling me I was the only person on the emergency list to contact, which was kind of odd. The person told me that John's medical care expense was adding up, that the Army paid for the surgery but not for the hospital stay, and asked me if I'd be willing to transfer a payment from our marriage bank account of the amount of $10,000 for his hospital stay or they'd throw him out of the hospital. This perplexed me, and I told this person, we don't have a marriage bank account, and I asked to speak to John. At first, the person refused, but then I told him that I need to ask John which bank account I should use to transfer the money. And suddenly they said yes, and they voice called me from the number via WhatsApp. It was John who answered, and his voice was shaky, and it sounded like he was sort of crying. He told me he was scared as everyone in the hospital except for the doctor I was speaking with spoke German only, and he didn't know what they were saying, and he was absolutely terrified. Now, this was a bit of a turning point in this relationship because John said he was born and raised in Germany to German parents, and they spoke German, and he had to learn English at 15. And now suddenly he doesn't know German? John said they need the $10,000 for his hospital stay or they'll throw him out and he can't walk. I asked him why the Army's not paying for it, and he said they paid for the surgery but nothing else. He was confused and scared, and I asked him if his mother and daughter know what's going on, and he said no. He didn't want to worry them, and his daughter's still sick, so please send the $10,000 so he can go home. The doctor would give me the transfer information where I could make a bank transfer. Well, I told John I'd send the money right away, but the bank doesn't open till the morning. John said to do it online, and I told him I don't have online banking. But the doctor, go ahead and have him give me the information. John told me he loved me, and then the phone went silent and hung up. Suddenly, the doctor was back to texting me, saying John fell asleep due to the medicine he's on, and then he texted me the name of a man in Germany that I need to do the bank transfer to. He told me to send two transfers for 5,000 US dollars each to avoid complications and tell the bank it's to purchase furniture online. By this time, I texted my friends Stephanie and Nick and asked them to join a private group chat online, and I filled them in. Both of them decided to come over to the house to sort this mystery. We started playing detective and looked into everything. We came across romance scam stories of fake military soldier profiles, and lo and behold, we found John's photos on romance scam sites. We found out the photos had been used for years by scammers, and I was dealing with one of them. We had the bright idea to look into this person in Germany we were supposed to send the money to. His name was Nigerian, but living in Frankfurt. He showed up on an FB search, and he looked to be a young guy in his 20s with a girlfriend. There was only one man in Frankfurt with that particular name, so we were pretty confident it was him. While I was heartbroken, I was more angry, as I sent all those Apple cards to this romance scammer and his girlfriend. The phone kept getting message after message from the so-called hospital, and I ignored it until that evening. I then called the number, but no one would answer. I messaged them and told them to have John call as I had to ask him if I could send extra money because I loved him so much. Well, this John person took the bait and he called me from the so-called hospital number. And I asked how he's doing, and he said he's still scared and confused because they were all talking to him in German and he didn't understand what was happening. I then decided to ask him why he doesn't understand German because he told me he's from Germany, his parents were German, and he spoke words of German to me when we first met. I wanted to hear his excuse, to which I wasn't disappointed. John told me he suffered a head injury when he broke his leg and he's forgotten how to speak German. These guys are so creative. John then asked if I can text the hospital number a photo of the bank transfer. I told John, no, I won't be doing that as I decided that I really am in love with Nick from work and we're running off to Las Vegas to get married and I'm dumping you. The phone was silent for a while and I said hello a couple of times. All I could hear was what sounded like someone sucking on their teeth before John said, "Come on, you playing games with me, just send the money." I told him no, I wouldn't be doing that, and Nick is so much better than him. It's over. I had a laugh and hung up. I blocked him on FB and deleted the app we chatted on, Zangy. I thought this was the end, but unfortunately, I played a game with the wrong person as John had some sort of miracle, and a few days later, I received a text message on FB from another name named Agent George, who told me he received my X rated photos. He then sent them to me and said I have 24 hours to send $10,000 to him, or he would send them to my coworkers. It scared me at first, but then I messaged Stephanie and Nick, warning them and admitting I did take X rated photos. They both kind of laughed at me and blocked this so called agent and told me not to worry about it. It was more funny than embarrassing at that time. I told this agent that Nick has seen everything as we're married now. And I told him that, John, you and your girlfriend need to just go away. And I blocked him. I did get some friend requests from some weird people I didn't know, but I blocked them as they came in. Neither Nick or Stephanie or any of my friends heard from anyone or received any compromising photos of me. I did lose money from all those Apple cards, probably close to $1,000, but I could have lost so much more. If this John had not been controlling and didn't have such ridiculous stories of being hurt and not knowing German, I may have fallen for it and sent money. That's my encounter. Don't fall for those sweet words. We'd like to thank this lady for sharing her story. Oftentimes, if you really listen to a story from a romance scammer, they do slip up sometimes and their stories make no sense, or they'll tell you something like they're from Germany, but then all of a sudden later on, they can't speak a word of German. So always look for inconsistencies with stories, especially when it's talking to someone you've met online. If you'd like to share your encounter with a romance scammer, whether you've lost money or gift cards or didn't lose anything, but just had a weird encounter. You can find us on FB, Scamming Cyber Education. You can drop us an inbox there or drop us an email, scammingscammers@gmail.com. Give me some time to go through your story and narrate it. Also, screenshots help us to verify that your story is legit. Until next time, stay safe and never send gift cards to someone you just met online. Take care.